Do quantum computers pose a threat to Bitcoin? This is an all-important question, and in today's episode, we're going to have the co-authors of a new paper titled Downtime Required for Bitcoin Quantum Safety on with us. And in this episode, we're going to help unpack their new paper so that by the end of watching this episode, you're going to have a more sound understanding of what the quantum threat is in relation to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and distributed ledgers. Let's dive into today's exciting episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the QRL Show, the place where you come for the crypto and stay for the quantum. On today's Post-Quantum Panel episode, myself and Michael Strike from the QRL team are joined by several great guests from the University of Kent School of Computing in England, who I'd like to introduce. First with us is Dr. Carlos Perez-Delgado, Joseph Kearney, and Jamie Pont, and also author on their paper is Jack Moyler. Myself and Michael were real excited to have them on the show with us. In a moment, I'm going to let them kind of give a little bit of context on their backgrounds, but as I mentioned already, they are the co-authors of a paper that was recently released, Downtime Required for Bitcoin Quantum Safety. To kick things off, guys, Dr. Carlos, could you give a little background on yourself, port it over to Jamie and Joseph, and then that can really kick off our conversation nicely.
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. Carlos is fine for all intents and purposes. So my name is Carlos. I have a PhD in quantum computing from the University of Waterloo in Canada. After completing that, I worked for a while at the University of Sheffield in the Department of Physics and Astronomy and the Center for Quantum Technologies of the University and the National University of Singapore in Singapore. After that, I came back to Britain, where I currently hold the position of senior lecturer at the University of Kent School of Computing.
Great. Awesome. Over to you, Joseph or Jamie.
Of course. Hi, I'm Joseph Kearney. I'm one of the co-authors on the paper, as has been mentioned. I have a master's degree from the University of Kent and currently just about to finish my PhD with Carlos as my supervisor at the University of Kent, hopefully this time next week. And I've been working with Carlos for about 7 years on this area. So started during my master's degree. I worked in industry for 2-3 years, designing consensus algorithms and designing a layer 1 blockchain from scratch. And then 4 years ago, rejoined University of Kent, studying my PhD. Looking at post-quantum blockchain technologies. And so this is our fourth paper that we've done together.
Perfect. Over to you, Jamie.
Hi everyone. My name is Jamie. I got my PhD from the University of Kent a couple of years ago. That was in computer science, specifically looking at ransomware detection and to some extent recovery. I then spent a year or so looking at random number generators, trying to identify signs of bias in RNGs and quantum RNGs, which sort of led me to where I'm at now, which is looking at this kind of intersection between quantum computers and how they impact current technologies, particularly those that rely on cryptographic protocols, where I'm now working with Carlos and Joseph.
Great. Michael, you want to give a quick background on yourself, QRL, what we're about?
Yeah, so for those that haven't seen our show before, don't know me, my name is Michael Strike. By trade, I've been a classical engineer, a solutions architect for over 20 years. I essentially route switch, firewall, process improvement, helping design, talk to operations. I've been doing that for a couple decades. I work as the director of outreach on the quantum resistant ledger, and we work at the intersection of blockchain and quantum computers. We are the only blockchain in the ecosystem that uses a digital signature algorithm that is recommended by NIST, which is the United States government authority on cryptographic algorithms. So I've been doing this for quite a while. I've been in blockchain since about 2013 when I bought my first miner. And all of the Bitcoin that I mined, I spent a long time ago. So that's it.
Yep. Perfect. Well, just to wrap things up, I'm also on the QRL core team. Been involved in the blockchain crypto space for a number of years, came from a traditional marketing background, tied kind of paired with economics, sold a marketing agency a while ago, but have been in crypto for a long number of years. Really just, we live at the intersection of crypto and quantum. So this is a perfect conversation to be having in this panel today. So really, I'd like to kick off our conversation today with your paper, Downtime Required for Bitcoin Quantum Safety. I'd like to jump right into the meat of it. Of if you guys could start out from a high level, what threat or threats does quantum computing pose both to Bitcoin, but also just to distributed ledgers, cryptocurrencies that aren't post-quantum secure today? Because obviously Bitcoin, that's the focus here, but there's a lot of impacts in all areas and industries. So if one of you would like to kick this off, we can jump into this full-ranging conversation.
Sure, Ryan, why don't I give you a little bit of a zoom out, give
Yeah,
a
perfect.
30K view, and then we can jump into the paper. And as we head towards the paper, I'll let Joseph and Jamie pick up the slack. So I realize that your audience is very smart and very knowledgeable on blockchains and cryptocurrencies and also quantum. But let me just give a first principle start so we're all on the same page.
That's great.
So cryptography is the art of hiding information mathematically. So here's a question for your audience. What are the prime factors of 221? Okay, that's 17 times 13. Right now, that's hard. That's hard to calculate. Right? It's hard to find prime factors, and the numbers are not big. 17 times 13. If I give you bigger numbers, say 20 and 30, and I tell you multiply those two numbers, that's 6,000. Right? And that's very easy. Sorry, 600. That's very easy to calculate. Right? Even though I just made a mistake, but it's a lot easier to multiply than it is to encounter prime factors. And this is true for human beings. This is also true for computers. And we use that mathematical duality of some problems are much easier to do in one direction. Multiplying is very easy and very difficult to undo. Factoring is hard to secure our information. That's what cryptography is all about. And one of the big areas of cryptography nowadays is public key cryptography or asymmetric key cryptography. That means that you use different passwords to encrypt information and to decrypt information. Right? If you just want to log onto your computer and you want to encrypt the information on your computer, one password is enough, right? You just need the same password to encrypt and to decrypt. But if I, Carlos, want to send you, Ryan, a message, and I want to encrypt it, and you need to decrypt it, then unless we meet together at a safe, secure location, so I can give you the password, we need two different passwords. And that's where asymmetric key cryptography comes from. It's also very useful to sign information. If there's two keys, and one is public key and one is a private key, I can encrypt part of my message using my private key, and then everybody can decrypt it. This is not to secure the information, obviously, because anybody can decrypt it. But if they decrypt part of that message, and then that corresponds to another part of the message, they can know for a fact that I was the one that encrypted that message, and I was the one that wrote that message. That's what we call a digital signature. And that's extremely important for cryptocurrencies because you want to sign all the transactions. So all of our cryptocurrencies, all of them, Bitcoin included, but every cryptocurrency uses that sort of duality of problems, hard, easy, in one and the other direction, in order to sign things, in order to do other operations. We've known that factoring is hard for computers and for us for millennia. We've been trying to factor large numbers for more than two millennia now. So we're fairly certain that classical computers, at least, are very bad at factoring numbers. Quantum computers, on the other hand, are very good at it. Quantum computers, generally speaking, have two main algorithms that are the reason why we care about them. One is Shor's algorithm, which is very good at factoring and very good at a very related problem, discrete logarithm. We don't have to get into it, but these are very strongly related problems upon which most of modern day public key crypto systems are based upon. And so when you sign something with ECDSA or with RSA, those signatures are secure against classical attacks, but they're insecure against quantum attacks. Quantum computers are very good at cracking these. There's another algorithm, which we may or may not get into more in depth, but it's worth mentioning here. That's Grover's algorithm. Grover's algorithm is much more general, but a lot less powerful in the following sense. Shor's algorithm gives you an exponential advantage for factoring. That means that a classical computer might take several times the age of the universe to factor an RSA 2048 key. A quantum computer could do it in maybe 7 minutes. So an exponential advantage is huge. It's not a number because exponential means it scales exponentially with the size of the problem. A lot of people take 2 data points and they say, oh, this one is exponentially larger, which really gets to me. But exponential advantage is huge. Grover's algorithm does not give you an exponential advantage. It gives you a quadratic advantage, but it gives you a quadratic advantage on a huge plethora of problems. Grover's algorithm is an algorithm that allows you to search for the solution to a problem, and it gives you an advantage when you don't know how to search for that solution. So I give you a large set of possible solutions, and you have no idea of where to look. All you know is how to recognize a solution when you see it. Sort of like the apocryphal quote, right? I don't know what art is, but I know it when I see it. Same here. You don't know how to find the solution, but you know it when you see it. So when that's the case, and there's lots of problems that are like that, where you don't have any search mechanism, you don't even have a good heuristic, but you know the solution when you find it. Grover's algorithm gives you a quadratic advantage on that, and that's very important for proof of work, which, as I said, we may or may not get to, but I'll let you gentlemen decide whether we get into that or not. Pushing back to Shor's algorithm, quantum computers that are what Professor Mosca at the University of Waterloo calls cryptographically relevant. These are quantum computers that can break RSA, that can break ECDSA. We can expect those with good probability within a decade or so, 2035, thereabouts. When these quantum computers come into existence, they'll be able to factor all the numbers behind the signature schemes in all of our cryptocurrencies. This is Bitcoin included, any cryptocurrency that is not, like QRL, quantum resistant. What do we do about that? Well, if you have a bank and your bank uses ECDSA or RSA to communicate, and now there's quantum computers, it's easy. You take down your system, you stop allowing connections, you tell your customers, you know what, you have to come in person until we update our system. And you can do that because the bank is a physical system. There's something other than the online component of the bank. And updating from non-quantum secure crypto to secure crypto means just doing a software update. For a blockchain like Bitcoin, which I'm not going to explain blockchains to your audience, I'm assuming they know, the blockchain is a distributed ledger that is always online, right? You can't bring it down to update it. And the whole history of all the transactions are online. So if you want to update your ledger, your online ledger, to be quantum secure, you have to go and backtrack all the current transactions that are still out there and make them quantum secure. That's a huge difference between, just a software upgrade. And when I say easy, I mean, banks and organizations, I don't have to tell you, are often victims of ransomware and other attacks because upgrading your software is not easy. But compared to the monumental task of upgrading a ledger, an existing ledger, to quantum safety, it's trivial by comparison. So Jamie, Joseph, and I, and we
Jack as well. Yeah.
and Jack, thank you. We looked into this problem and we calculated the amount of time that it will take you to upgrade to quantum security the entire ledger, the entire Bitcoin ledger. Now, this is a result that is specific to Bitcoin, and that this is the cryptocurrency that we ran the numbers on.
Yep.
But the impact of
biggest
the paper
market
goes
cap, but
way
it
beyond
affect
that.
all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, it goes. We can run the same numbers on any non-quantum secure cryptocurrency, and you'll find something that is similar. Bitcoin is obviously one of the most grossly affected because it's larger. There's a lot of transactions out there. It's been going for a long time, but any non-quantum safe cryptocurrency, that wants to become quantum safe will have to do this update. Now, before I go into the number and I let Jamie and Joseph go into the details, let me just talk about the three major constraints and why this is an issue. On the one hand, quantum computers are coming, right? And we have to complete our upgrade to quantum security before quantum computers are here. As already mentioned, experts foresee that we can expect to see these quantum computers maybe in 10 years, maybe sooner, maybe a little bit later. But to be on the safe side, you want to complete this task as soon as possible. You have to start the task, therefore, as soon as possible. But in order to do any upgrade to a network like Bitcoin, you need 90% consensus on all the blockchain miners. So you have to convince them all to agree to a quantum safe protocol. So this upgrade is not going to start anytime soon. So that constrains the time that you need to take. Now, the number that we calculated, correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph, Jamie, I believe it's 70 days, somewhere around that.
76 days,
76 days. That's the total amount of time, of processing time, to make Bitcoin quantum safe. That means that if you were to bring down Bitcoin and only have it process the update, so do nothing but the upgrade, it would take 76 days of continuous processing where Bitcoin can do nothing else. Right? Yeah. So compare that to companies. If Google goes down for a few minutes, it's a catastrophe, right?
Think of our Wi-Fi going down for 5 minutes, extreme. And I think we might touch on this in a little bit, Carlos, but it would be great in a little bit if we get to maybe your guys' touching on modeling a little bit, but continue on, Carlos. We're all with you.
So I'll just wrap up by saying that it's 76 days continuous downtime. This is not a 76 days where you can probably process a transaction. It's 76 days where Bitcoin is doing nothing but processing the upgrade. You can spread this out. If instead of doing it 100% for the upgrade, you only do use 10% of Bitcoin's processing power for the upgrade, then you can spread that out to 760 days where you're throttling Bitcoin. But again, that gets us to the other problem where we have three constraints. One is we need to start as soon as possible. The other is we want to finish as soon as possible. And then there's the constraint of, well, we want to spread it over as much time as possible so that the impact to the network is smaller rather than greater. And that's the long and short of the result that we've just put up on the archive.
That's really interesting. So is the 76 days, it's based on transactions per second, the average transaction per second of Bitcoin, of the cryptographic difficulty of Bitcoin, along with, did you compare that against public keys that are written to the ledger that still have balances, or how did you get to the number of wallets? I'm curious about, or how did you get to the number of transactions that need to be done? And then the transactions per second is pretty static, but how did you get to the number of transactions that need to be done? I'm interested in that.
Do you mind if I take that one, Carlos? We came to that number by looking at the number of UTXOs. So with Bitcoin, it's maybe a little bit simpler because you could just take the number of UTXOs. And then we built what we consider an optimal block. So we built a block that was optimal for upgrading the network. So essentially, without going into too much technical detail on Bitcoin block structure, you've got the input, which is where you reference a UTXO previously on the blockchain from a block in the past. And you have an output that outputs to the new block, essentially spending the old output and creating a new unspent output. So we created an optimal block, and it's wildly unrealistic, but we wanted to give as short a period of time as possible. So what we so within this block, essentially you've got all the metadata, but you've got as many inputs into one single transaction that you could possibly get, and then one single output. So it's a completely unrealistic block. So that 76 days it's going to take longer than that. But as I said, we want to give as much of an advantage to the upgrading process as possible. Yeah, sorry, Jamie, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, if I may, just to sort of add into that, that ties into this concept of what, the sort of non-tight lower bound that we talk about throughout the paper. So as Joseph was saying, we are making some assumptions here that are unrealistic in some cases. For example, excluding block header information. You can't have a block without a header, but we can at least, for the purposes of our maths here, make the assumption that all of the weight units in a given block are dedicated to these upgrade transactions. That does result in, as I say, this non-tight lower bound. Obviously, there is an avenue of future work there potentially to tighten the lower bound by reintroducing some of these, by making the block more realistic, if you like, adding back in header information, perhaps not directing all inputs to a single output, and this arguably will give you this will give you a lower bound that is closer to more of a realistic estimate. But of course, the benefit that we have of this non-tight lower bound is that, apart from the assumption we've made that the underlying Bitcoin protocol is unchanged, we really do have a lower bound here, if that makes sense.
The long and short, basically, what we're trying to say is that 76 days is the absolute minimal that you could possibly get if you did absolutely everything within your power to condense as much information per block. Because
So-
I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's I follow you. That's really interesting. So let me ask you this: do you see this as the 76 days? Do you see this as something that developers and Bitcoin users are able to set aside, not a block, but a date? Well, let's say a block and or a date or something like that, and be able to actually shut this down? Or do you see people, the ecosystem and the free market driving the change in that I really want this Bitcoin transaction to go through, so I'm going to increase the payment that I put along with the transaction, and then the transactions are then competing with the migrations? That's my first question. Which scenario do you see of those? And my second question to you guys is, I often get asked if Bitcoin can hard fork, and my answer is typically yes. Bitcoin can hard fork, but it is impossible to get all of the coins migrated. So that was two questions. Sorry, I can probably break those up in the future to one question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So please.
I'll answer the second question first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Bitcoin can hard fork, and it's done so many times in the past. I mean, you only have to look at Bitcoin SV with the arguments there and how they wanted to keep it as pure as possible.
But they've never had to deprecate DSAs before.
So no, of course. And I think this brings it to actually a more interesting question to some extent, which is this possible is this actually possible? Because, for example, the one thing, if I owned a quantum computer tomorrow and I wanted to make a big statement, I was a malicious actor, the first thing I'd do is go for Satoshi's
early coin.
Cryptocurrency.
Wait, that's been happening.
I don't think it's his.
Mines.
I thought it was some older whales, but
I don't know if they were stats, but they were really old. But anyway,
yeah. Which begs the question:
not fudding.
Yeah,
continue, Joseph.
But yeah, it's is like that would be my first target because I mean I don't know whether your audience will know, but for example, early Satoshi, all of Satoshi's Bitcoin that he owns on the network was paid to public key, not paid to the hash of the public key, which is a critical difference.
Yeah, touch on this a little bit, Joseph. I think that we've touched on this in past episodes, but just touch on the difference because a lot of people viewing this, maybe you're viewing this, you got into Bitcoin, and some people hold like a mix. If you, depending on how early you got into Bitcoin, if you just got on last year, it's very different in terms of.
Of course, I mean, the standard now is to use pay to the hash of the public key. Mm-hmm. So, hash of a public key, as long as that public key hasn't been revealed in a further transaction, you're essentially quantum secure for all intents and purposes. Like if you're using a 256 bits hash function, then you've got if you used Grove as outward, so we mentioned the two, Carlos mentioned the two algorithms earlier, you can't use Shor's algorithm on that. You can use Grover's algorithm, and it drops the security to something in the region of 128-bit security, which is still more than enough. Like, fine, we could double the key size of the hash functions. That's not too much of an issue. But basically, what I'm saying is, currently, if you receive Bitcoin, your Bitcoin is quantum secure, as long as you don't reveal your public key. However, in the early stages, it was actually more paid to. It was the block miner rewards. So Satoshi, Hal Finney, the rest of the early people to the party. All of their block rewards were paid to the hash of the public key. And this is also compounded by the fact that obviously when Bitcoin first started, you got more reward per block that you mined. So there's massive, massive amounts of unquantum secure rewards from blocks out there. And as I said, like, if I was a quantum attacker, if I was a quantum aggressor, the first thing I would do is attack Satoshi's Bitcoin that he mined at the beginning. Because firstly, you're sending out a statement saying, I'm here, I have a quantum device. It might take a while for people to realize that, but that is essentially what you'd be doing. Plus, you get you're financially rewarded for it, assuming that you don't completely tank the price of Bitcoin. And thirdly, if you are just a malicious actor that doesn't like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, a blockchain in general, you're scaring the market.
The ripple effects alone of that is, picture a physical bank and word gets around that everyone's funds are slowly getting taken. What's everyone to do? Run over there, make sure theirs are good. But no, keep going. I just trying to give that visual picture for everyone viewing it.
So this is a question that I've held for quite a long time, and I think Carlos has as well, and Jamie has as well. And it's something that I think we actually mentioned in the first paper that we published. We looked into a plethora of blockchains that were the most popular at the time, and essentially analyzed how quantum resistant they were. Is it possible to actually upgrade these blockchains? And the answer is yes, but you're going to have to make some very tough decisions, because we're given this 76-day time limit, but in fact, there's actually a more important time limit, which is you need to upgrade your entire blockchain by the date that a quantum device exists. The devices that Carlos was talking about that are capable of breaking ECDSA,
which we'll probably never know.
Exactly. I mean, it could be happening. I mean, it could be government entities. It could be. I mean, private firms. You don't know when this is going to happen.
So you have to reach. Okay, can I summarize what you're saying?
Yeah, of course.
So essentially, what you're doing is you have to take the largest blockchain in the world, the longest. That's probably more accurate. The longest blockchain in the world. Bring together developers and users and all reach consensus on a post-quantum DSA, be it land port signatures or whatever they're considering today. Reach consensus on that. Everyone has to upgrade their nodes, and then a manual transaction that the user has to do in order to migrate from their ECDSA public ECDSA key pair over to a new post-quantum secure digital algorithm. And you have to do all of this. And then also you have to do all of this, reach consensus on to do this, which so far, even just up to this point, is a blockchain development undertaking greater than, I would say, any blockchain undertaking that's ever been completed in the history of the blockchain ecosystem. And you have to do all of this before quantum computers arrive, and you also have to deprecate the old digital signature algorithm and the old pay to public key scripts, other scripts. You have to deprecate all of those, essentially in a knowledge vacuum, to where you don't know where quantum computers progress is actually at, because it's being developed by the brightest minds in the world under a veil of secrecy comparable to the Manhattan Project. Is that about right, or did I miss anything?
That sounds pretty accurate. Yeah,
that is fairly accurate.
And the thing that you're also to some extent missing there is that you then got to go and do this to all, I can't remember the number of how many blockchain project protocols there are out there.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I think there's so many different lanes we could fork down from here in terms of our conversation and the discussion we're having. I think for the viewer at home, whether, like you mentioned, hey, whether they're in the Ethereum community, Bitcoin, they're an OG, or they're someone that's new to the blockchain space, I'd like to maybe in a part two, we'll delve into more of it, but maybe for the viewer alongside, we're going to include it in the show notes so everyone that's viewing this can go through and read your paper, do further research themselves. What are some things that either they should be thinking about? So maybe two questions here. What should viewers be thinking about in terms of their own maybe digital asset portfolio? And then also, what are things that the Bitcoin developers could potentially be doing today to tackle this massive mountain, which is the quantum threat that's posed? I know there's a few questions within there, so whichever of you want to start this one, this would be helpful, I think, to get back to the part of, okay, what do we do about this threat?
Um, Let me try to answer that, and also give you. I'd also like to correct the record a little bit. I'm not technically correcting Joseph. He knows this. He's a co-author in that paper, but he said something that I fear might be a little bit confusing to some of your audience
Just to add
members,
some context and clarify.
where he mentioned that when we were talking about paying to a public key or paying to a hash of a public key, the two mechanisms used in Bitcoin, and he said something to the effect that if you've only been paid to the hash of your public key, then you're secure against quantum attacks, and that's not true. This is important to clarify, in that the difference is that if your public key is public, as opposed to only the hash of your public key, like Satoshi's Bitcoin is, somebody can go in and steal your Bitcoin now if they have a quantum computer.
So-
If the only thing that is publicly available is the hash of your public key, then he's correct in saying that Bitcoin cannot be touched by a quantum computer. But the moment you want to spend that
Transact.
Bitcoin, you have to make your public key publicly available. And in that moment, a quantum attacker can come in, hijack that public key, put in their own transaction using your public key, and put in a higher payment so that their transaction goes in before yours does. And that's important. So it means that your Bitcoin is insecure, whether you have it in a hash, whether only the hash is known or only the public key is also known. It's functionally as insecure. It's more secure in the sense that as long as you don't try to spend it, it's secure. But I mean, Bitcoin that you can't spend is not very useful. So from a functional perspective, everybody, whether their public key is available or not, has to upgrade their Bitcoin before cryptographically relevant quantum computers come into play. So this is something that I think your audience needs to be aware of. That
Perfect. Thank
a
you
lot
for
of people
clarifying on
assume
that.
that if only the hash of their public key is known, they're safe. This is not true. This is one of the key points in our paper, is that there's an attacker can and will steal your Bitcoin.
Can I
So
extrapolate on that a little bit as well? Extrapolate on what you just said.
go ahead.
So you have the different scripts, right? Pay to public key hash. Irrespective of what transaction type you're using, you still have to present your public key out of all of these scripts. And the first thing that the node's going to do is to make sure that your transaction is going to exist on the node that receives a solved block from a miner. Is it's going to broadcast it to all the other nodes along with your public key. So in the mempool, let's say you're on a bad block. Let's say you're on a block that's, instead of 10 minutes, it's taking 50 minutes. We've seen this. It is not uncommon for Bitcoin miners to take more than an hour to solve a block. So in that meantime, in RAM, you have your public key sitting along with your transaction. Now, if there's a sufficiently powerful quantum computer anywhere on the network, I could rewrite that transaction, just include a higher stat fee, And the miner based on game, the miner that in the node based on game theory is going to select the transaction with the higher fee because that's going to give them the most in return. So, and in fact, I actually have a separate attack vector that we're going to say for another time that extrapolates upon that even further. In that, and I'll say this in the video: you are not even limited by the amount of time that the public key is. You're not necessarily limited by the amount of time that the public key is sitting in mempool. I have an attack vector that we can talk about another that could set this out for days, but we're going to save that.
I'd like to ask the question of what's the technical cost of trying or aiming to implement these safeguards, both for blockchains, crypto, and I think this would be nice to touch on because there's obviously the aspect of, hey, this is how it looks in theory. This is how it would work in practice. Carlos, you nailed on some of those constraints. Obviously, there's some of those are tougher than others, but let's touch a little bit on the technical cost, because I think this bakes into how hard it actually is to do in practice. This would be interesting.
I mean, I don't mind.
It's never been done before.
Well, I think that's the answer to the question. That it's never been done before. We've got no idea how hard. I mean, you only have to look at when they were upgrading to Bitcoin was upgrading to SegWit and the absolute mayhem that caused at the time.
Yeah, huge.
That's nothing compared to what we're trying to do. What they're trying to do, and and the thing is, SegWit could have taken as long as they wanted. This can't take as long as they wanted. I mean, I think for the first time, and Carlos, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the predicted date for quantum devices that are capable of doing these things we're talking about is actually going down rather than up.
Yeah,
like it's getting closer to 2030 than it is going away from 2035.
Oh, one other thing. So people don't realize, Carlos, you touched on this. The DSA for the digital signature algorithm, essentially, how miners commute to nodes and sign transactions is all based on elliptical curve, which is that factorization problem you talked about. Really easy to multiply numbers together, even prime numbers together. Really hard to reverse that one-way function, right? What a lot of people don't know is you said that knowledge has been around for a very long time, and I completely agree. But a lot of people don't know that asymmetric encryption, specifically RSA, has been around since the late 70s. This factorization, and this in a lot of ways, at least in my mind, this is a legacy technology. It's been around for going on 40, 50 years now, and people don't always realize that they, when they talk about cryptography or DSAs, they just assume that things are just secure. It's encrypted. This is an encryption. This is a DSA, so it's cryptography. I'm just speaking broadly. However, they'll say, okay, it's encrypted. Okay, it's unbreakable. Well, this technology has been around for almost 50. We've been doing it this way for almost 50 years in order to secure bank transactions, in order to secure your credit card information, HTTPS and TLS through your web browser. So, and there are companies, however, that do see this risk. Google and other companies are already putting into place post-quantum secure HTTPS and TLS mechanisms in order to be able to encrypt web traffic so that it can't be stored now, decrypt later. I'm actually completely shocked nobody said harvest now. I think it's harvest now and harvest now, decrypt later in Europe, and it's store now, decrypt later in the Americas for whatever silly reason. Cloudflare actually has a dashboard. Since they're a major hosting provider prevents against DDoS attacks. They actually have the dashboard, and I think they're up to like 15-20% of post-quantum secure algorithms for web transactions. Now, obviously, changes need to be rolled out to the client as well, and there's a lot of other dependencies. The point I'm making is this technology's been around since the late 70s, and it's not just us talking about this. There are lots of companies that you're not going to really see them on the news. You're not, unless you really start digging and start doing your own research, that are already migrating to post-quantum secure cryptography. And the reason is because of this, I think Carlos, I think you mentioned Michel Mosca. I think you mentioned his name or something. Mosca's theorem, which essentially tells you that if you have information today that needs to be classified and stay secure for the next 10 years, and you think quantum computers, and you accept that there's a high degree of high probability that quantum computers, a sufficiently powerful quantum computer, will be around in 9 years, then you're already 1 year behind the schedule that you need in order to maintain the classification of the data that you're encrypting. Thoughts?
I spoke about this at a conference in the London Blockchain Conference a little while ago over the summer, and I had exactly the same view. I think one of the main things that I said at the time was, if you are creating a blockchain product of any description at the moment, you should be doing it with post-quantum in mind, and that I think is.
I love the fact that you said that, because one of the other things I try to communicate in podcasts and spaces is, if you want to be quantum secure, you have to do so from the first block.
Oh, absolutely.
It's obvious to us, but no, Bitcoin will just hard fork, or we'll just handle it later.
I think Vitalik Buterin said something similar. We can just roll back. I think it was his.
It was the roll back part.
I
think it was 4 months ago. Yeah.
So one of blockchain's tenets, if you will, is immutability, right? And being this trustless ecosystem, right? So in Vitalik's, I think it was on Reddit or something, that he had wrote up, in order to accommodate a quantum attack that was not expected, first step, roll back the chain. Wait a sec. You can't just roll back a blockchain, because then that undoes transactions that have already been finalized. Essentially, the world is moving on since then, and that breaks the immutability, which is the core tenet of blockchain. But
I just want to add something to that slightly as well, and I must admit, I think I am a big fan of Ethereum. I think it's an incredible blockchain. I think what they've done is incredible. But one of the current issues that they've got at the moment is the fact that they've all the proof of stakers, every single one of them has their public key publicly available at all times. So how are you going to roll back if every staker is under the control of a quantum entity?
Wrapping things up, I know we've talked on a couple different areas here based on our conversation. One part where I'd like to end with as we wrap up is, I'd like you guys to fill in our audience before we do a part 2, whether we do that in the coming weeks or months. I'd love for you guys to send our audience, those viewing this, down a rabbit hole or two, whether it's pointing them to exact places, a source to read more on, or if you guys just want them to do a little bit more research and digging. If we could even pass the mic around to each of you, you guys can point our audience in the right direction. I think this would be a great way to wrap up this post-quantum panel episode, and then we can build on it and progress it from there.
As the wrap up, I would just point, if you have the link to our newest paper which is on the archive. It hasn't gone through a peer review yet, but I expect it to go as our previous papers have gone. And obviously that paper will have the results that we talked about today, but it also have all the references, Mike Mosca's paper and other papers that have gone before it. And so any research, technical research paper will have, it's full of references and sources for further reading. And that's where I would point your audience if they're really interested to get into the weeds and dig into this problem.
Perfect. I know we mentioned this already, but for those watching, just look in the show notes. Downtime required for Bitcoin quantum safety. We'll make it nice and easy for you to point to. I know we've pointed to it within content in the past week, but if you're viewing this, you can easily find it near the top of the show notes. Jamie, Joseph, anything else to add as parting words before we wrap this up? This would be great.
Well, yeah, pretty much echo what Carlos says. One other thing which kind of touches on a question that you asked earlier, Ryan, about what can be done now. Now, I'm not saying that this is a solution by any stretch of the imagination, but another lower bound that we present in the paper takes taproot transactions into account. And in this case, I think the lower bound is closer to, I think it was 54 days or something, correct me if I'm wrong. So arguably that is something that the community can start now. That there's not necessarily a need to wait to upgrade to a Taproot transaction or UTXO. So yeah, that's potentially a first step. But as I say, it's not a solution necessarily, and still, even if everybody upgraded, you're still looking at least 50 days of downtime, which is still, approaching 2 months worth of downtime, which is still unacceptable and would likely cause havoc among the community and for Bitcoin overall.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Jamie.
Can I just add one more thing to what Jamie said before Joseph gives his parting words? Throughout the interview, Jamie and Joseph and I, we've both been using the word unrealistic assumptions. And I want to be careful that your audience takes the right message away with that. When we say unrealistic, I hope they're not thinking, oh, these are just ivory tower scientists with their unrealistic assumptions. It's not going to be 70 days. It'll be a lot easier. No. Our unrealistic assumptions go in the opposite direction, right? The 70 days is a very, very optimistic lower bound.
Yeah, it's not the upper. Yeah,
realistically, it's a lot more than those 70 days, right? When Joseph spoke to this, but just to reinforce, all of our assumptions were going in the opposite direction. Let's use a unrealistically optimized block. Let's have unrealistically small overheads, etc., etc. Everything where we could go and assume against us and in favor of the upgrade process. Against us, I mean, in our ringing the alarm bells. Every choice was made to make the upgrade process, or our view of the upgrade process, as optimistic as possible, to the point of being unrealistic. But that's, like Jamie said, in order to have a strict bound where we know that bound is unbreakable unless you come in and change drastically the Bitcoin network. Like, say, for example, if you were to lower the block time to 1 minute rather than 10 minutes, well, obviously that speeds things up. But unless you're going to do something like that, which is has other reasons why that might be difficult, then you should be looking at our paper's results with a fair sense of alarm, and that these are not unrealistic numbers in one direction. They're unrealistic in the opposite direction, where your audience might be hoping.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you adding that emphasis on that specific part, because that's important as people are reading through it and not thinking the opposite, as you mentioned. So I'll port it over to you, Joseph, with some closing words.
If I was going to get your audience to think about one particular thing, is the scale of this problem for the wider blockchain community. This is going to affect every blockchain network, excluding QRL. But I mean, it still will affect QRL, because at the end of the day, this has the potential to completely destroy what the blockchain community have been building for the last decade and a half. If every single blockchain that exists, every single layer 1 protocol needs to upgrade, and that is a crazy amount of work. And it's about the knowledge. It's about the knowledge area, and I think that's one of our motivations for what we do. This is the motivations for the reason that me, Carlos, and Jamie and Jack write papers in this area, is because we want people to understand the scale of this problem, and that this isn't something that's going to go away in the next few years. It's not going to be easily solved. And do I think Bitcoin and Ethereum and others will get to some level of post-quantum security at the damage of other parts of the blockchain? Yes. But some of the smaller networks where there isn't actually an active developer base anymore, it's more of a group of people that are still following the token, they're going to be at serious risk. And along with many other facets and areas of blockchain networks and their ecosystems in general. But that's what I'd like your community to think about. This isn't a small, isolated problem for Bitcoin.
The rest of the ecosystem that relies on ECDSA, you're never going to get all of the coins. So if it's really hard to get someone that's unalive to type in their key, right? So as an example, or someone that's maybe prone to accidents and has lost their point being, there's Bitcoin out there that has public keys associated with it that are never ever going to move again. So each person can decide for themselves what is actually active and which actually has a person behind it. If you consider 65% or 75% of a migration as a successful metric for success, then yes, I guess that means it's successful. If I was migrating a Microsoft Exchange database at work, and I came up to my boss and says, the good news is we're done. Bad news is we lost 30% of emails and customer invoices, but we got the migration done. If that's good, then I guess we're good.
Just to literally looking at the value of the total market cap for all blockchains at the moment, that would essentially write off about 800 billion in assets overnight.
And you don't actually have to have a quantum computer attack in order to negatively affect perceived value. We all remember, I don't know if you guys remember what happened with LK99. It's room temperature superconductor. They thought they had made one. It turned out to be false. But that put physicists everywhere in a state of chaos.
Speculation alone, obviously, there's so many variables at play
that's
there.
Market value.
Yeah. Closing out here, I think, first off, myself and Michael, I appreciate you guys taking the time to join us in this initial conversation.
Yes, thank you.
Not only did we enjoy it, but I think we look forward to some upcoming ones talking on how this continues evolving. I really think that our community is probably going to have a number of questions on it. So whether we do an AMA, I feel like we could do a separate episode alone just on talking on what the Bitcoin developers and coming to consensus, what are some action items maybe for them. But for those that are listening and watching at home, first off, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to hit subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already, so that when we have great guests such as the co-authors of this paper and stuff at the intersection of crypto and quantum, you're the first to know. Carlos, Joseph, Jamie, we appreciate you guys joining us and look forward to the next conversation. Until the next episode, make sure to keep those digital assets post-quantum secure. For every one of you watching, appreciate you guys, and
Thank you guys.
I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.